Welcome to Adventures in Crafting, Episode 1. Today we're going to make sci-fi tiles. They're good for tabletop role-playing games in the far future or grim dark future, skirmish games or war games. Now I'm going to make 6-inch by 6-inch tiles. You could make them 3-inch by 3-inch like Wylock and Blackmagic Craft do, or you could make them 1 foot by 1 foot or even larger. It's really up to you what suits your game needs. Now with a 6-inch piece of XPS foam, I'm going to be drawing out some basic geometric shapes. I had no real plan when I started, just that I wanted to make something that looked like interlocking plates or floor grates and tile, just something to give it some visual interest so that it doesn't just look like a flat square. So I kind of mark out with the ink pen first to get my dimensions. Drawing some lines here and there. But mostly I'm making the lines with the X-Acto knife. And the reason for that is because it creates a groove that you here enhance with the ink pen. As you can see, those lines jump right out. Now here I'm making a little grid square, well, rectangle, and I'm going to turn it into what is ultimately going to be like a vent or drain or grate of some kind on the ground. Mark off at 1/4 inch increments. You can do whatever increments you want, obviously. Your tile, your choice. Now I go through and make the lines with the ink pen first in this case so that I have them nice and straight. And then I come back through with the X-Acto to actually cut them in. And then I'm going to go back again with the ink pen. Now I'm going to make sure that I have nice clean lines in case I goofed here or there. Now the ink pen here with it extracted with the push type ballpoint pen, I'm going through and just using the tip of it to make little holes. I try to make them evenly spaced as best I can, and this simulates rivet holes or screw holes that are holding the plates in place. Now this is my secret ugly Oreo. I tried to sketch around this paint pot and I did not do a good job. It is not very circular, but I kept it. You're going to make mistakes, and I don't want you to think that I am somehow perfect at this, because I'm definitely not. Continuing with the ink pen, I make dents and scrapes to weather it. Now we're moving on to a piece of single corrugated cardboard. This is your regular packaging cardboard that you get from just about anything you'd order from Amazon or anywhere else. I've got some corrugated paper, pieces of cross-stitch mesh, and offcuts from other projects. Very simple. Hot glue most of this down. Any pattern that you feel works for you. I found that super glue works best on the quote-unquote granny grating there. And this is just a bag tie from a sack of potatoes. Very complicated, as you can see. Now I'm going to cut a piece of this corrugated paper, and I do it the wrong way actually. I cut from the back, which makes it tear a little bit, even though this is a very fresh X-Acto blade. So I'm going to trim off the ugly edge, because we don't want that. We want this to look like some sort of corrugated metal. I'm going to roughly figure out how much I need, cut it off cleanly, hot glue it in place, keep going. Now I'm going to use a piece of this cardboard. Now this is cardstock that I got from candy we got for Halloween to hand out. Now it's regular cardboard, thin cardstock that you would have on a cereal box or any other instant rice or whatnot, macaroni and cheese. This just happens to be a fairly larger piece. Now, I found that the edges from the manufacturing process can be curled, and we don't want the curl. It just doesn't look good, and it's going to change basically the dimensions height-wise on your card. So I trimmed it off. Here you can see that it leaves a little shadow, and that's a good way to indicate. Now this is the side that I cut off, and there's no shadow. So I'm going to lay out a L shape, and I'm going to cut off the corners, because that seems to be pretty ubiquitous in a lot of these sci-fi tiles. And I'm going to hot glue that in place as well. Pretty simple. Now you can use whatever glue you have at hand, whatever adhesives you want. It all pretty much works. Now I'm using the pen and an X-Acto knife to create rivet holes just like I did on the first time. Now the pen doesn't work so great, and ultimately I end up damaging the ink pen here. Lesson learned. The click type ballpoint pens don't work so well for this if you're going into cardboard. Here I take it apart to see if I can fix it. No such luck. I move on to a non-retractable type of pen in order to be able to make the holes that I want here. Now we have EVA Foam. This is pretty interesting stuff. It's very thin. You can get it at all kinds of craft stores and big box stores. I ordered mine through Amazon. Again, 6-inch sheet. Now it has no flex or rigidity, so we're going to put it on a piece of single corrugated cardstock. Now I put down what looked like a lot of super glue there. Ultimately, it's not enough. You'll find out when I start to cut that I have to reattach several of the edges. And even later when I go to enhance the marks that I make on it, it bubbles up in places, and that's because it wasn't fully adhered. Make sure that you glue it down very thoroughly, otherwise you're going to run into the same problems I did. Now again, left in my mistakes so you can learn from them. Now here I'm going to wrap my tape around the blade that's no longer sharp and throw it away. Safety first. Here we're going to go through all the lines that I drew with the ink pen and enhance them, and there we see me correcting one of my mistakes because I cut too far through, A, and B, didn't glue it down enough. Again, didn't glue it down enough. No big deal. We've got the glue. We'll use it. So I cut out the squares. Using that same pen, I keep the pen tip in this time and press down, kind of like a cookie cutter to make rivets. And here is where it gets interesting. Now you'll see that the texture starts to change. And then my fire alarm goes off. This is a great time to remind you that if you're liking what you're seeing, let me know. You should also share this with anybody you think might like it too. I'm also interested in you subscribing because that tells YouTube you really want to see more. And hit the notification so that the next time my video comes out, you can see it. Continuing on with better ventilation, now you see my mistake from not gluing again where it bubbles up. It's not the end of the world. It does ultimately go away once it cools down for the most part, but it does add texture to it, and I look at it as free weathering. Who doesn't like a little free weathering when they're doing a little tile texturing? Going back and enhancing my lines because they didn't come through quite enough. Making sure that it looks like individual squares on this. And there you go. Another finished tile in a completely different style with different materials. Now we go to one of my favorite and cheapest products to use because you can do so much with it. This is foam core. This is the cheap stuff from the dollar store called Ready Board. The paper on it peels very easily, which is really nice. You can see here as I get a hold of it, you can peel it off fairly quickly and easily. And of course, if you have trouble getting it off, you can soak it in water, and that goes for the more expensive boards as well. Here I make a much better circle with the lid of a super glue accelerant can lid. It cut into the foam and paper pretty well. Now during this process, I left the paper on the front. I would suggest you actually take it off first because it makes peeling it off easier when you haven't got a bunch of little pieces to peel off from cutting it with the knife or ink pen. But again, like with the foam tile, I had no plan in place. I made shapes. The shapes came out to various different diagonals and rectangles and what have you. Just something to make it look interesting. Go through and enhance all of your lines, making sure they look good. And the beauty about this foam core is you can just do it with an ink pen. You don't need a knife. You don't need any special tools. A ruler and an ink pen is your best friend here. Again, tip of the pen, making my rivet holes. And it's pretty much done. I go through and I add a lot more rivets because that seems to be the cool thing to do these days in sci-fi tiles. Rivets. Lots and lots of rivets for some reason. So I do that. Here you go. Lots of rivets, lots of lines, different shapes. Pretty simple and very cheap and easy to make. I knocked that out in about 5 minutes. Now here are all 4 of the tiles finished. Cheap foam core, EVA foam, on cardboard, mostly cardboard and scraps, and anything I had just laying around, and of course XPS foam. And there we go. Now we're going to coat Mod Podge in black paint with a little bit of water in it. This is a pretty basic recipe that just about everybody uses. I learned it first from Black Magic Craft. It's about a 50-50 mixture and a little bit of water to help dilute it down. I'm not going to go into too much detail here, but you just cover the whole thing, as you see. Now we're going to base coat 2 of them with black craft paint. Cheap, easy, readily available. The other 2 tiles I actually spray painted with my airbrush because I've got one and I might as well use it. Now we're going to go into some detail painting. The plan here is pretty basic, grays and dark browns and whatnot to make it look interesting. Now I overbrush heavily on this foam core one because I don't want to get into the cracks because that's where my detail is. I just go with a basic medium gray, paint over the whole thing, and pretty much stop there when it comes to my base coat. Now I'm going to come back in with some darker colors and pick out a few of the other spaces in order to give them a little more detail, and I stipple it in, as in taking the brush and poking it down at the board, because it also creates texture. Changing my color here to a lighter gray and putting it on in varied quantities and thicknesses. Of course, I'm not cleaning my brush in between. I am not washing anything. I'm just making some grays and muddy browns, and there you go. No, it doesn't look like much now, but it'll get better. Now this is the cardboard only one. Pretty much the same basic thing. I use the same paints that I still had on my cardboard palette there and brush them around. I use a couple of different techniques, like here I stippled onto the smaller piece to make it look like worn paint, and then I dilute intentionally here and put it on, and with a paper towel kind of dab it off because it really made it look like worn paint and metal. Enjoyed that a lot. I like the technique. I'm going to take that same dark brown that I've got there and hit some of the other places like that grading to make it look like it's maybe a bit rusted. You can go as heavily or as lightly as you'd like with this. I hit the centers of it for the most part because that's where it's most likely to rust. And of course, ubiquitous dry brushing. All the things you haven't painted to this point are going to magically come to life by hitting the edges with a very dry brush of light gray paint, as you see here. Now this one I went with a different technique. I took that deep brown because I wanted it to look like bronze. Now that bronze color shows through because of the black base coat. Then I take some actual bronze metallic and chip and scratch at it to make it look like it's worn in places with gouges and whatnot. Using that same bronze paint, I'm going to enhance the centers of each one of those spots to make it look like it's even more worn. I was surprised at how well this turned out in the end. Obviously here it's still wet and not very interesting looking, but the overall end result is amazing, I think. Now we're going to make some patina. We do that by taking a little teal and a limey green and dilute them quite a bit and start spreading them out in places where you think patina would form on these bronze-like plates. Just like that. And of course, the XPS foam tile. Here I picked out specific sections to paint with various colors. I did this because I wanted to be more interesting. Stippling green here, slathering gray there. Here I even try to make my own deep dark metallic. It didn't turn out that great. More practice needed in that area. But silver and brown paint made kind of a, well, we'll say it's interesting. Now we're going to add some rusting effects. Now you can use any brownish and orangish and blackish paints you want. I use a piece of foam here. It's actually sponge-like material that I broke off and chipped away at places, making it look like the paint had worn through to bare metal. Did the same with the rust, and now silver paint. A little dry brushing, and it's pretty much done. We get to do the fun part now, and that's the washes. Now washes are interesting to me because they add a lot of interesting detail. Of course, make sure somebody in your home is strong enough to open up a pickle jar, because I was struggling a lot. I mean a lot. Like, I barely thought I was going to get it open. So this reddish brown is going to make this bronze effect look really good once it dries. The rest get the black wash. Now black wash is just water, black paint, and a little bit of dish liquid to break the viscosity or surface tension of it so that it actually flows better. And here's that. We're going to let those dry. And here's the end result. I know it's not terribly exciting, but there it is. Bringing the colors together, making it look like a cohesive thing. There's the bronze, and of course, XPS. Well, thank you for watching, and go have an adventure in crafting.